D&D are the two worst writers in Hollywood history. That's all I have to say. Or at least, that's where I'd like to leave it, but that wouldn't be as satisfying as ranting about why these two idiots are the worst writers to ever pick up a pen. That, dear viewer, has become the sole reason for my existence. In this video, I will tell you about everything that went wrong in Game of Thrones, every butchered character or missed plot point, and how the story could have been told better by literally anyone other than these two. If you clicked on this video, I think it's safe to say that you, like me, are still sour about the ending, and you're looking for yet another opinion confirming your hatred of it. I don't blame you. I blame him. Game of Thrones was arguably the best medieval high fantasy story ever put on TV. It had everything you could possibly want in a fantasy. Dragons, magic, fancy if not out of place British accents, sword fights, and even a unique take on the zombie genre to top it all off. Each character was deep, each had their own unique goals and motivations, and methods of pursuing them. The reason for Game of Thrones' historic drop in quality is that the writers ran out of source material. Most of you probably already know this, but D&D did not write Game of Thrones. It's based on a book series called A Song of Ice and Fire. A book series that is unfinished, and probably never will be finished because George R.R. Martin, who I will just call Germ from here on out, got too famous and too old. But that conversation deserves a video all its own. When D&D got to around season 5 of the show, they had to take over the writing with only a bit of guidance by Germ and plot points from the unreleased books. So in a sense, I can't really blame them for not delivering, because they literally had a guide for the whole show up to that point, and then it was all up to them basically to wrap up a storyline that spans over 20 years and not even the author seems to be able to tie together. A Song of Ice and Fire has some of the most complex lore I've ever dug into. There are a lot of plot points and characters that were merged together or cut entirely from the Game of Thrones show, and the end result is a mashed up blob of a story that mixes prophecies together and makes certain characters outright useless. And that's it, D&D. That's the only defense I can offer you. See, these guys may have been working with an unfinished story, but it seems they didn't even try to understand the blueprint they were using before they started seeing dollar signs. For example, one of the aforementioned mixed up prophecies is that of Azor Ahai, the prince who was promised, who will wield a flaming sword and destroy the Great Other, the evil god who created the zombie-like White Walkers. And while I'm on that note, let me go on a quick tangent. There is no Great Other in the Game of Thrones show. Instead, D&D completely invented a new character called the Night King, presumably just so they could have an easy out to winning the final war. But back to the main point. According to countless pieces of evidence throughout the books, and a reveal in the show itself which may have come directly from Germ himself, Jon Snow is the secret son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark, the former being the late heir to the Iron Throne, and the latter being the sister of Ned Stark, the man who raised Jon Snow as his bastard son. The significance of this potential lineage is that the Targaryens were the only people who were able to tame dragons. They were able to do this because, according to myth, they have actual dragon blood in their bodies. The Starks, on the other hand, have the blood of the First Men, the race of people who built the magical giant wall in the north to keep the White Walkers out of their lands. The blood of the dragons, which represents fire, and the blood of the First Men, which represents ice, came together to give birth to Jon Snow. According to prophecy, Azor Ahai is said to have a song of ice and fire. If the connection isn't already obvious, it seems Azor Ahai, by all indications given in the books, is the main character Jon Snow. And this is where D&D's utter incompetence comes into play. Somehow they gathered that Jon Snow was the son of Rhaegar and Lyanna, but not the ice and fire connection. I'm thinking Germ must have just told them about Jon's parents, because I don't see how they could have missed the obvious implications behind the reveal. See, instead of fulfilling the prophecy, Jon Snow goes on to do nothing. His entire storyline is unfulfilled. He was set up the entire series to be the one who ends the White Walker threat, but instead his victory is given to Arya for no reason. This completely throws the prophecy of Azor Ahai out the fucking window. What, are we supposed to believe Arya is Azor Ahai? Are we supposed to get from this that Azor Ahai never existed and all of that was just a waste of time? Because that's my takeaway. Jon Snow, the true heir to the Iron Throne, the prince who was promised, ends up no more than a pawn in Dany's war for the Iron Throne. And then he gets sent back to Castle Black despite saving the 7 kingdoms from a murderous tyrant. No, sorry, 6 kingdoms. And speaking of murderous tyrants, if you know the books, you'd know that what D&D did to Euron Greyjoy is one of the most egregious offenses throughout the entire series. In the books, Euron is looking to perform some mass sacrifice to the Drowned God, the deity that the people at Storm's End worship. In doing this, he aims to become a godlike being himself, gaining terrible powers and seeking to sit the Iron Throne himself. And that's not the extent of his character either. Book Euron is pure evil, calculated and cruel. He cut out his crewmates' tongues merely because he wanted silence. He got a woman pregnant just to sacrifice her to the sea and raise a sea monster. He killed his own brother for power, and he believes himself to be a god. In fact, his end goal is to kill all the other gods and have them impaled on the swords of the Iron Throne, and to rule the world as some evil deity. Show Euron, on the other hand?
First, I'm gonna fuck the queen.
Clearly, D&D either didn't read the source material for this guy, or they concluded that he was too complicated and decided against giving him his actual storyline. It seems they included Euron just to have a character in the show with the name. But make no mistake, the one in the show is not Euron Greyjoy. And to speak of another murderous tyrant, what happened to Daenerys in the show still boils my blood to this day. If she was going to end up going mad and burning King's Landing, there should have been some kind of indication of that beforehand, some kind of setup. But there wasn't. As has become a theme with these guys, I don't think they thought that far ahead. Now I know what you might be thinking. Dany was a Targaryen, a member of a family known for incestuous relationships and a long history of madness as a result. Dany's father, Aerys Targaryen, was known as the Mad King because he would burn people alive for little to no reason, and during his final moments alive, all he cared about was burning down King's Landing. Following this, you might say it only makes sense for Dany to go mad. After all, as the saying goes, whenever a Targaryen is born, the gods flip a coin. And yes, this is true. This is a satisfying explanation for Dany's sudden 180-degree turn. I'm not even upset about what Dany did. I'm upset about how we got there. There was utterly no build-up, no foreshadowing, just pure shock value. Aside from their butchery of Euron, this is probably the biggest writing flub D&D made in the series. A close second, however, is what happened to Bran. What was the point of his storyline? He gets pushed out of a tower, loses his ability to walk, gets pulled into a journey beyond the wall with little to no explanation as to why, and ultimately ends up becoming the new Three-Eyed Raven. Yet another character with little to no explanation despite his far-reaching implications for the story. Bran says multiple times that he's not Bran anymore. He is the Three-Eyed Raven. So at the end of the show, when Bran says that the reason he came all this way is to be crowned king, it's not Bran saying that. It is the Three-Eyed Raven. And D&D really skated past that like it wasn't existentially horrifying. We know next to nothing about the Three-Eyed Raven, but from what we do know, he has ties to the Great Other and the White Walkers. He is a Targaryen bastard named Brynden Rivers, and prior to getting stuck inside the roots of a weirwood tree, he was a Hand of the King, a spy master akin to Varys, and later the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. A stacked resume. He was known as Lord Bloodraven for the mark on his face, and due to his warg abilities to take over the bodies of animals, mostly birds, he has the ability to watch over thousands of lifetimes at once. And not only that, he somehow has the ability to transcend time, and witness thousands of lifetimes over thousands of years. All these abilities are transferred to Bran when the former Three-Eyed Raven dies, and Bran effectively becomes the new host for this ancient entity. So, why is this concerning? Well, if Bran is no longer Bran, but some ancient entity we know nothing about, who has been orchestrating the events of the series for generations for the ultimate purpose of sitting atop the Iron Throne, what does that mean for the story? As a Targaryen bastard, Brynden Rivers undoubtedly had aspirations to become king. So, you're telling me he succeeded?
That just makes no fucking sense. I mean, it's just bullshit.
The character we barely know takes the throne over the rightful ruler in Jon Snow, while said rightful ruler is cast off to the wall for no crime. That isn't satisfying to me. And more than just unsatisfying, it is a little disturbing to me that this strange entity manipulated everybody to win the crown, and D&D had no issues ending the series like that. There's talk that Jerem gave these two idiots plot points regarding the last two unreleased books. Well, on account of that, I'm suspecting that D&D read Bran ends up on the Iron Throne, and had no concern for what that might mean in the end. In fact, I'm almost certain that's what happened. The last two seasons were a half-assed attempt to fit puzzle pieces together by two guys who really don't know what they're doing, because they didn't pay attention to the lore of the books enough to connect the dots. Well, let me try and do just that. With Dany burning down King's Landing, Jon killing her and Drogon burning the Iron Throne, Jon being sent the wall, and a seemingly evil entity being named King, I think this was setting up the true final villain of the series. The Three-Eyed Raven. See, in the books, the White Walkers aren't evil per se. They're described as a different form of life. It is highly possible that the Three-Eyed Raven manipulated the world into fighting them to keep them from killing him. If this is the case, then D&D literally created a show where all of the good guys lose and the overarching evil villain wins in the end. And for an already dark show, that's a really bad way to end things. Game of Thrones had some of the best lore ever written to work with, and tons of support from fans at HBO itself. It had the potential to be the greatest show ever made, but greed and stupidity fumbled all of that in 6 episodes. There's not really a greater example of pride before the fall than that. If only we could get George to finish writing the books, we would be able to wash the taste of this ending out of our mouths. But I don't think that's gonna happen, considering his workflow. Have you seen Game of Thrones or read the A Song of Ice and Fire book series? What are your biggest gripes with Dumb and Dumber? Leave a comment letting me know what you think, and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this one. Thanks for watching, and take it easy.